Apple is lobbying against a bill aimed at stopping forced labor in China. It's a bit convenient, right? So let's hop into this article. It's courtesy of the Washington Post, who I know I've given a tough time in the past for their seemingly pro China stance. And it's not necessarily that they have a pro China stance, but it's the pro China rhetoric that they allow to be placed in their paper that is fairly obviously propaganda. But we have to commend them on this article. Apple is lobbying against a bill aimed at stopping forced labor in China. Here's some of the highlights. Apple lobbyists are trying to weaken a bill aimed at preventing forced labor in China, according to two congressional staffers familiar with the matter, highlighting the clash between its business imperatives and its official stance on human rights. It says the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act would require U.S. companies to guarantee they do not use imprisoned or coerced workers from the predominantly Muslim region of Xinjiang, where academic researchers estimate the Chinese government has placed more than 1 million people into internment camps. Apple is heavily dependent on Chinese manufacturing, and human rights reports have identified instances in which alleged forced Uyghur labor has been used in Apple's supply chain. The staffers who spoke on the condition of anonymity because the talks with the company took place in private meetings said Apple was one of many U.S. companies that opposed the bill as it's written. They declined to disclose details on the specific provisions Apple was trying to knock down or change because they feared providing that knowledge would identify them to Apple, but they both characterized Apple's effort as an attempt to water down the bill. Well, I certainly commend these folks for coming forward with the knowledge that they have, and I'm all for capitalism. I consider myself to be a capitalist, I would guess, but stuff like this makes you wonder if it's more of like a corporate capitalism that we have going on as opposed to a free market capitalism, right? I mean, I don't know. We have to straighten this out though. How can a citizen or somebody looking to start a company compete, for one, with slave and forced labor, right? And for two, the most important part really, how can we have forced labor in 2020? And I've seen a lot of these companies spreading these woke messages, which, some of which have valid points, right? But then these are the very same companies that turn around and use forced labor in China. Doesn't make any sense. Let's continue on with this article, though. What Apple would like is we all just sit and talk and not have any real consequences, said Kathy Feingold, director of the International Department for the AFL-CIO, which has supported the bill. They're shocked because it's the first time where there could be some actual effective enforceability. That is shocking, and I think Apple would be worried about that, right? As much as they like to appear on the surface to be a fair company, it's obvious, and we all know that they're getting some of their parts via forced labor, which needs to be addressed immediately. Apple spokesperson Josh Rosenstock said the company is dedicated to ensuring that everyone in our supply chain is treated with dignity and respect. Josh, I really hope you're going to hold yourself accountable to your last sentence there, right? We don't condone forced labor and support the goals of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. We share the committee's goal of eradicating forced labor and strengthening U.S. law, and we will continue working with them to achieve that. Carrying on with the article, he said the company earlier this year conducted a detailed investigation with our suppliers in China and found no evidence of forced labor on Apple production lines, and we are continuing to monitor this closely. Okay, well, I would just say this, it's fairly simple. If Apple is producing anything in Xinjiang, it is most likely involving forced labor, right? Here's an article from The Guardian, a quote I'm going to read you real quick. China has built 380 internment camps in Xinjiang, study finds. Okay, back to the Washington Post article. Apple's lobbying firm Fierce Government Relations disclosed that it was lobbying a bill on the behalf of Apple in a disclosure form that was first reported by The Information. However, the form did not say whether Apple was for or against the bill or whether it wanted to modify it in any way. Lobbying disclosure forms do not require that information. Fierce referred the Washington Post to Apple's public relations team. So let's see what Apple CEO Tim Cook has to say about that. Apple CEO Tim Cook has said publicly that Apple does not tolerate forced labor in its supply chain. Cook said in a congressional hearing in July, "We would not tolerate it in Apple," he said, adding that Apple would terminate a supplier relationship if it were found. Well, Tim, I give you this article courtesy of The Guardian. Apple imported clothes from Xinjiang firm facing U.S. forced labor sanctions. Look, I'm all for you supporting your shareholders in your company. At the end of the day, that's your job, and I understand that. And I know you have lobbyists and lawyers, but the doublespeak does get a little bit old when it's obvious this has happened in the past and most likely continues to happen. I think at the end of the day, the burden of responsibility lies on you and your company to screen these companies before you go into business with them. Because it's blatantly obvious to almost everyone on the outside that if you're importing anything from Xinjiang, it involves forced labor. So, what is actually happening in Xinjiang, you might wonder? Well, that brings us to this BBC article. What is happening in Xinjiang? Reports by the Australian Policy Institute and the US Congress, among others, have found that thousands of Uyghurs have been transferred to work in factories across China under conditions the ASPI report said strongly suggest forced labor. It linked those factories to more than 80 high profile brands, including Nike, Apple, and Gap. The article goes on to say that there's up to 1 million Muslim Uyghurs being held in China's detention camps or internment camps in Xinjiang, which reportedly is described as job training and education. Officials say they are responding to risk of extremism and have dismissed claims of concentration camps as fake. Carrying on with the article, Omar Khanet, executive director of the Uyghur Human Rights Project, said getting companies to shift business away from Xinjiang is critical to convincing the Chinese government to change its policies. Until now, there have been condemnations of what the Chinese government has been doing, but there have not been any actions, he told the BBC. The Chinese government will not do anything unless there are some real impacts, so therefore targeting the companies means a lot. So, what are governments actually doing about this issue? The article goes on to attempt to try to answer that question. Here we go. What are governments doing? The call for action comes as the U.S. has also ramped up economic pressure over the issue. This month it sanctioned Chinese officials overseeing the region and warned firms against doing business in Xinjiang. Like I said, it's kind of obvious there's something going on in Xinjiang, right? American border officials also seized a shipment of 13 tons of hair products from the region worth an estimated $800,000. While the Commerce Department blacklisted 11 more companies, suppliers said to work with firms such as Apple, a move that limits the ability of those firms to buy U.S. products, citing abuses. At the end of the day, free market capitalism almost embodies the American spirit, right? It encourages entrepreneurs to try, take risks, fail, try again. But when that capitalism has been seemingly hijacked by these mega corporations and twisted into a whole nother object, we need to take a step back and reevaluate and try to get back to our core fundamental values. Thank you for watching this video. Check back soon for more content.